Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to everyone joining us from around the world for USAID's second biannual virtual symposium on protecting children and youth from digital harm. I hope you are enjoying the wide array of sessions queued up in the symposium and are able to engage in meaningful conversations with peers from across the globe on this very important issue. I'm Ananya, Youth Advisor to USAID Digital Youth Council, and I'm very happy to moderate this conversation with USAID strategy leads, where we will be discussing three critical strategies that are shaping USAID's approach to protecting children and youth from digital harm. We will start by exploring the USAID digital strategy. The USAID Digital Strategy is a development policy document focused on the promotion of secure, open, and inclusive country-level digital ecosystems and the programmatic use of digital technology in the agency's development and humanitarian assistance, which we commonly refer to as digital development. The vision of the USAID Digital Strategy is to advance progress in communities in partner countries, efficient, effective, and responsible digital initiatives that enhance security and economic prosperity consistent with the American values of respect for individual rights, freedom of expression, and the promotion of democratic norms and practices. We will then delve into the advancing protection and care for children in adversity APCCA strategy. The strategy gives particular attention to strengthening families because nurturing and loving family care is essential for children's development, protection, and safety. The strategy starts from the premise that sustainable development depends on the capacity of parents who have the primary responsibility for ensuring the healthy growth and development of their children. Parents, together with other members of their families, communities, civil society, faith-based organizations, and governments, promote the safety and well-being of children, even in the face of formidable threats and challenges. The strategy also recognizes that young people are allies and actors in promoting their own safety and well-being and that of others. The goal of the strategy is to ensure the US government's investments for the most vulnerable children and families around the world are comprehensive, coordinated, and effective, and support partner countries to sustainably finance, manage, and deliver services that lead to stable, resilient, and prosperous families and communities. And finally, we will turn our attention to the Positive Youth Development Strategy, an essential framework that underscores USAID's dedication to empowering young people around the world. This strategy recognizes the immense potential of youth as catalysts for change and aim to provide them with the necessary tools, opportunities, and support systems to thrive. It emphasizes that practices and policies must work with youth improve their skills, competencies, and ability to employ their assets and aspirations to make or influence their own decisions about their lives and set their own goals in order to achieve desired outcomes. It hopes to help them contribute as a source of change for their own and for their community's positive development and create an enabling environment where the youth are safe, secure, and protected and live without fear of violence or retribution. Now that we have piqued your interest and have your attention, please join me in welcoming three senior USAID officials who will highlight the collaborative efforts, innovative approaches, and the potential synergistic impacts of these strategies in advancing USAID's mission of protecting children and youth from digital harm. First, we will hear from Alana Welch. Alana Welch is the team lead for the implementation of USAID's first ever digital strategy, and she leads USAID's digital public goods and digital public infrastructure practice. She has nearly a decade of experience working at the crossroads of digital technologies and global development. Previously, she served on the agency's Ebola task force between 2015 and 2017 with the Global Development Lab, focused on the use of technology in emergency response and recovery efforts. Alana also served as the Global Director for the Principles for Digital Development at the Digital Impact Alliance from 2017 to 2020, where she advised donor, multilateral, and implementing organizations on the best approaches to utilizing technology in their development programs. Balana, could you please tell us and our audience a little bit more about the USAID Digital Strategy and how it works for the protection of children and youth from digital harms?
Thank you, Ananya, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good night. I am so happy to be with you today and participate in this panel with you and my other colleagues from USAID. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share with you how USAID's digital strategy is working to protect children and youth from digital harm. The digital strategy aims to help USAID and our implementing partners navigate opportunities and risks that digital technology presents to children and youth. Thus, we decided from the start to make protecting children and youth from digital harm, or PCYDH, as we say it, make that a key work stream and one of our 18 initiatives to ensure that it was prioritized during programming. USAID's priority is focused on helping staff and partners to understand how to implement effective approaches and responsibly engage with the digital ecosystem to keep children and youth safe from digital harms. Through coordination with the private sector and other donors, the PCYDH initiative has gained an understanding of the depth of the issue and how USAID can support targeted interventions. We're now in our third year of implementation of the strategy, going into our fourth, and we have seen a number of effective practices. One of these practices has been to listen to the voices of youth and children from around the world. That's why we formed USAID's Digital Youth Council, which Ananya mentioned she sits on. And we thought that this was just really essential for our own engagement. For the audience out there, this is a cohort made up of 12 high-achieving international youth aged 16 to 24 who help to inform USAID's approach to child and youth protection from digital harms. They help us to implement the strategy and advise us along the way so that we can adjust our approaches and make sure that youth voices are heard and represented in our work. We're continuously looking at how we can improve our programming in this fast-paced digital world. For example, to understand the issue, the PCYDH team has conducted a landscape assessment report and developed a primer, which summarizes the state of the sector and includes recommendations for next steps that USAID can take moving forward. The primer outlines how we define digital harm and the digital risks facing children and youth, while acknowledging that, of course, digital ecosystems offer critical opportunities for children and youth to learn, develop life skills, connect with peers, and have fun. This new document outlines our approach to classify the range of online risks and helps USAID to design and implement preventative mechanisms to mitigate and prevent digital harm for youth and children. We want to show that children and youth are not a monolith. As we and our partners implement activities, we need to consider intersectionality across race, ethnicity, caste, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability to develop and increase youth and children's resilience online. Those with disabilities, LGBTQIA+ people, Indigenous youth, migrants, ethnic minority children, they're all at a greater risk of experiencing digital harms due to harmful cultural and social norms rooted in patriarchy that make them especially vulnerable in online experiences, even as the ability to connect via online communities may also bring particular benefits to them. We need to consider the specific developmental stages, risks, and opportunities relevant to children and youth at different ages and in different stages of their lives. And of course, there is the aspect of digital harm and gender. In the online world, just as in the physical world, girls and women in all of their diversity experience inequality, and the gender-digital divide limits their opportunities. We also know that now one of the greatest risks posed to young women is technology-facilitated gender-based violence, or TFGBV. I'm sure you will hear a lot about that during this program. In fact, women, transgender, and gender nonconforming people with intersecting inequality factors, such as women of color, LGBTQIA+ women, and or people with disabilities, can face higher levels of online harassment and abuse compared to white, heterosexual, cisgender, and or able-bodied women. Considering all of this, through the digital strategy, we are trying to embed PCYDH and digital inclusion across USAID programming. USAID's utilization of digital tools in implementing youth-oriented activities increases the importance of embedding measures of protection, response, and safety against digital harm in programming. In line with USAID's revised Youth and Development Policy, which came out in 2022, USAID programming should not be developed for children and youth, but rather it should be developed with children and youth. This will allow their voices to be amplified and for USAID to hear their experiences and challenges firsthand. Knowledge and awareness about digital risks marks the first step to protecting children and youth from digital harm. And we have to integrate PCYDH approaches, tools, and considerations in every USAID education and youth-focused program to ensure that the digital ecosystem delivers benefits to children and youth rather than causing harm. Thank you for letting me make my opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Alana. Now let's hear from Rebecca Levy. Rebecca is the US government Special Advisor for Children in Adversity, as well as the Director of the Inclusive Development Hub within USAID's Bureau for Inclusive Growth, Partnerships, and Innovation. As Special Advisor, she leads the implementation of the US government Advancing Protection and Care for Children in Adversity, better known as APCA strategy, focused particularly on promoting early childhood development, ensuring nurturing and protective family care for all children, and preventing violence against children. Rebecca has served in numerous roles at USAID, including as a Presidential Management Fellow, working on earthquake response with USAID Haiti, as the Special Assistant to the Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean Assistant Administrator, and as an advisor to the USAID Administrator from 2013 to 2014. She was also the director of USAID Côte d'Ivoire's Economic Growth Office and served as USAID's liaison to the African Development Bank from 2013 to 2017. Prior to USAID, she worked on gender equality and women's empowerment with CARE Mali and on child protection issues for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Ghana. So, Rebecca, could you please provide an overview of the USAID Advancing Protection and Care for Children in Adversity, APCA strategy, and its role in safeguarding children and youth from digital harm?
Thank you so much, Ananya. It's great to be here with everybody. And I think you actually have done a really great job of giving the highlights of the strategy, but I'm happy to talk more about it and how we're working together to build stronger protections against digital harm. So yeah, as you mentioned, the APCA strategy guides our whole of government approach to investing in the development, care, dignity, and safety of the world's most vulnerable children and their families. And you highlighted our three main objectives. So that's the first one on early childhood development, that critical developmental window. The second one around strengthening family care for all children, with a particular focus on those who are outside of family care or at risk of separation. And of course, our third objective, to prevent children from violence, exploitation, abuse, and neglect. And within this third objective, we're really have this focus particularly around digital harm. So really happy to be here today to talk more about that. I think Alana, shared well that there's a lot of interaction between online and sort of physical world. And we know that as children find themselves online and within digital ecosystems, dangers and vulnerabilities from the physical world are crossed into the virtual world as well. And so there's a number of steps that we're really taking to address this. First, we're currently revising our APCA strategy and updating our APCA strategy, which will launch this spring. So within our updates, really stressing the importance of increasing the awareness of both the value and the risks of online access. We have to find ways to reduce children's exposure to disturbing or potentially harmful content while also maintaining their access to the benefits of digital technology. And that can be a tricky balance sometimes, but we know that there's a lot of potential harms, including exposure to sexual exploitation and abuse, to harmful materials, emotional violence and cyberbullying, and then misinformation, disinformation, and fraud as well. Alana also mentioned this rise in technology-facilitated gender-based violence, which is a key concern for all of us. And then beyond that, we know that there just continue to be hugely unacceptable levels of online sexual exploitation. Nationally representative surveys of internet-using children conducted across 13 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa and Southeast Asia found that as many as 20% of children in some countries had been subjected to child sexual exploitation and abuse online. So some really kind of shocking numbers. And this is one of the reasons why our APCA strategy and our updates are placing greater importance on the safeguarding of data and personal information of children through the use of both digital tools and stronger policy protection environments. And it's also part of the reason why we formed the Digital Youth Council, of course, which you are a core part of, just because we know that we need to bring young people into the conversation and listen to their experiences and perspectives in terms of making sure that we're getting our responses right. So we're really excited about having the Digital Youth Council participate in developing programs and policies that can help us improve our work in this area. And back to you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Now let's hear from Sarah Slayton, the agency youth coordinator overseeing the advancement of USAID's policy for youth in development and its goals to increase young people's access to and participation in the services, practices, and policies that impact their lives. Sarah brings more than 15 years of technical experience in international youth development, including promoting youth economic opportunities, coalition building and advocacy, and peace building and conflict resolution. She joins USAID after serving as a technical advisor for youth engagement, and before that, as director of the Youth Economic Opportunities Network at Making Sense International. Sarah previously led the growth and management of the Alliance for International Youth Development at Interaction, where she coordinated community advocacy for the inclusion and prioritization of youth issues in U.S. foreign assistance. Her past roles have also included program support with the Educational Quality Improvement Program at the Education Development Center and at Seeds of Peace, youth leadership and peacebuilding programming with youth from the Middle East, South Asia, the Balkans, and the United States. So Sarah, could you please explain to our audience what the USAID Positive Youth Development Strategy is and what its approach to protecting children and youth from digital harm looks like?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us together, Ananya. It's great to join this group in this conversation, and I'm always happy to see when our alumni from our programs, including the Digital Youth Council, come back and work with us on talking through some of these issues. So it's really good to see you too. I'm happy to share more about our positive youth development framework. And just to say that USAID recognizes prioritizing youth, which our agency defines as between the ages of 10 and 29, as vital to successful and sustainable development work. I know Rebecca and Alana have alluded to this. But to do this, we use our Positive Youth Development, or PYD for short, framework. PYD is both a philosophy and an approach that guides our programming. And it recognizes the need for a development strategy that views young people as a demographic dividend rather than a threat, as a population that has the right to safe, productive, and healthy lives, and as a group whose different ages, stages, identities, and circumstances require adaptive and targeted youth-friendly investments. So how does it work? The PYD framework is organized around 4 critical domains or areas of measurement that allow us to track progress towards achieving the vision of healthy, productive, and engaged young people. These domains are assets, agency, contribution, and enabling environment. And so when we look at young people's assets, we are trying to assess whether they have the necessary resources, the skills, the competencies to achieve desired outcomes, as well as their agency. So agency is essentially a young person's ability to recognize in themselves their skills and abilities and to employ their assets to make decisions about their own lives. And we recognize that successful development programs, indeed successful communities, require youth contribution. So in USAID activities, this means that they must be engaged across the program cycle. This can be from roles like advising, such as the one you've played on the Digital Youth Council, for example, to country youth assessments and research, design, program implementation, and evaluation, and as a source of change for both themselves and their community. And finally, on the enabling environment, this means that young people can develop and support their assets, agency, and access to services and opportunities in ways that strengthen their ability to avoid risks and to stay safe, so that the environment surrounding young people is supportive of those goals and outcomes. Within these 4 domains of PYD, there are 7 essential features of PYD programming. These features include things like developing essential soft and life skills, youth engagement and contribution, building healthy relationships and bonding with peers, with other adults in the community. It includes fostering activities where you feel a sense of belonging and membership. It means having clear and positive norms, expectations, and perceptions. And it means creating safe spaces tailored for young people, including digital spaces, and access to age-appropriate and youth-friendly services. So in other words, using the PYD approach informs the evidence-based design of our youth-focused programming, as well as program evaluations. So when it comes to the role of PYD in safeguarding children and youth from digital harm, we know that the digital world is a growing influence in the lives of young people, if not already. And the ability to use technology can be both an asset and a risk. It offers a lot of great opportunities for education, as Rebecca said, but we also know that these spaces can be risky and harmful to young people. And that's why we integrated a focus on digital technology and the prevention of digital harm into USAID's updated youth and development policy. And when we look at this through the lens of PYD framework, we take this into account and design programs that allow youth to use digital tools while still trying to keep them safe. Again, it's a tricky balance, but this is a key priority for USAID in our programs. So just to give you a couple of examples of what this looks like in practice, I'll mention the USAID's Credible project in the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and Peru. And this activity is focused on strengthening information ecosystems and shifting norms around information engagement by building media and digital literacy, and by energizing local media and the broader information space with youth voices and perspectives. And so by doing that, Credible supports local actors, including young people, to address informational challenges in their own societies and encourage more informed, productive, and inclusive civil discourse. Another program example of PYD in action is our activity Youth Excel. This is a global program that supports young people and youth organizations to use implementation research to strengthen local, national, and global development solutions. And so youth research, collect, and disseminate their own research through online and other channels. Maybe one other one I'll mention is our program in St. Lucia. It's called the Connect Ed program, and it's focused on building resilience and improving the quality of teaching and learning in St. Lucia by equipping youth and educators as digital literacy leaders in their communities. And so this is really grounded in the philosophy of PYD. The St. Lucia Connect Ed is taking a youth-centered and youth-led approach and providing St. Lucian young people opportunities to develop critical digital skills they need to be engaged and safe in person and online. So those are just a couple of examples of the kinds of ways this is showing up in our programs. And we also have a number of other resources online that can be really helpful when we think about how we integrate positive youth development approaches with the prevention of digital harm. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Now that we have discussed these strategies at length and how they individually work to protect children and youth from digital harm, I would like to ask you all, how do these three strategies work together to better serve children and youth and their families and protect them from digital harms? Let us start with you, Alana.
Thanks, Ananya. It's a really great question. USAID and the US government have developed a strong foundation to respond to digital harm affecting children and youth in development and humanitarian settings. Protecting children and youth from any type of physical, mental, or emotional harm has always been a priority for USAID, and the digital strategy is implemented alongside the APCCA strategy and the positive youth development goals, as well as USG's new national strategy on gender equity and equality. So USAID is at the forefront with other global and US agencies to ensure that the protection and safeguarding of children and youth in the digital realm. As Rebecca shared, the APCCA strategy is a whole of US government approach that is led by the USAID Center of Excellence on Children in Adversity. In developing the PCYDH primer, for example, the Center of Excellence on Children in Adversity team drew heavily from both the APCCA strategy and the Positive Youth Development Strategy. The team leads USAID in striving to protect children from violence in both the physical world and the digital ecosystem. And the APCCA strategy also recognizes the risk of digital harm as it aims to protect children and families, both domestically and internationally. By drawing on these guiding documents, USAID is actively building an integrated approach to digital inclusion, education, safety, and empowerment for children and youth. Additionally, given the sheer breadth and complexity of digital harm to children and youth, the initiative takes a multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary approach. And we formed a working relationship across the US government and with external stakeholders, including bilateral organizations, the UN, private sector, international governments, and youth and children themselves. By participating in various interagency policy committees on child protection, the initiative has laid the groundwork for further interagency collaboration. Our team also organizes an interagency and interagency working group and hosts quarterly U.S. government roundtables, which brings together U.S. agencies such as the State Department, the Domestic Policy Council, the CDC, and others. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alana. Rebecca, how do you think these three strategies interact to protect children and youth from digital harms?
Thank you. And yeah, Alana mentioned a lot of really great examples. I'll just add a couple of quick points. As Sarah mentioned, our youth policy covers ages 10 to 29, while the APCCA strategy focuses on children under 18 years of age. But this overlap in the early adolescence and adolescence period offers a really valuable opportunity to collaborate around this age group, and more generally to strengthen our ages and stages approach to supporting and partnering with children and youth. Children, especially older children and youth, we know are spending more and more time in the digital ecosystem. And we're in areas where USAID works, it's especially important to make sure that we're equipping families, children, and youth with the knowledge and support they need to safely navigate the internet. Children are often targets for predators, and they can't always spot the danger when they come across it online. The digital strategy touches on skills and knowledge necessary for children and youth to keep themselves safe, so really critical. And in addition to protection aspects of digital harm, the work streams that Alana already touched on also include addressing gender-digital divide, digital literacy, and cybersecurity. And it's critical that we remain mindful of ensuring that digital rights and inclusion are an integral part of the work we do to support children and youth of all ages. I'd say just critically, I think all three of these teams see children and youth as key partners in crafting solutions to digital issues. And the Digital Council itself is actually a great example of collaboration across our teams at USAID to sort of bring that, keep that council running and really make sure that all the teams are engaged and it's informing the work across these three teams. So that's been really great to see. But I will say, I think there's a lot more we can do, especially around ensuring that folks who are focused in the tech world and digital world and folks who are focused on protection and in youth, especially at country levels, are really coming together to collaborate in these areas as well.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And Sarah, how do you see this synergy?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great question. I would say that all three strategies provide guidance to USAID missions. And that's important because missions can enact and reinforce our broader agency's efforts to invest in and support children and youth by advancing programs that recognize that youth engagement and participation is essential for effective programming. It's prioritizing programs that invest in young people's assets. It's emphasizing the importance of fostering healthy relationships by involving mentors and families and communities, especially when young people are getting online. It's about accounting for differences and commonalities among children and youth. It's pursuing gender equality. And I think importantly for digital strategy, it's harnessing youth innovation and technology and creating ongoing opportunities for young people. So those are the kind of common threads across these different strategies that really speak to how we think about engaging and addressing the needs of young people. I would say that investments in youth translate to benefits for society by increasing their connections to civil society and helping young people make successful transitions to adulthood. So the PYD approach that I talked about just now informs an evidence-based design and evaluation of our youth-focused programming, including those with digital elements. So there's a helpful piece here that really brings together PYD and how we're understanding the impact of our interventions around the prevention of digital harm and utilizing technology in our programs. We've also seen that programs that utilize a PYD approach increasingly demonstrate that building the intellectual, the physical, the social, the emotional competence of youth across cross-sectoral programming is more effective as a development strategy than one that focuses solely on tackling single issue or sector problems. We've learned that over the last decade of implementing youth and development programs at USAID. And I think with the rise of digital technology and it's, incorporating that into our updated approach to our youth development policy and our youth programming, this is even more critical. And I think the way that these different strategies and policies intersect further just demonstrates why it's important to take a cross-sectoral approach. And it's why we're trying to strengthen and ensure the effectiveness of our youth programming is moving investments from single sector to really cross-sectoral investments that support young people in reaching their full potential. Implementers, our partners, can incorporate and measure PYD in youth programming to improve performance over time, contribute to the body of evidence on PYD, and ultimately influence multi-sector outcomes and impact, including for the prevention of digital harm. I would also say that similar to the digital strategy, interventions that take into account the distinct and diverse age-specific and context-specific needs of young people create conditions in which children and youth can thrive. So I think in summary, if youth programs are designed with positive youth development and keep in mind where relevant key issues outlined in the APCCA strategy and the digital strategy, and specifically the prevention of digital harm, they will be more inclusive and more effective as a whole. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So we have entered a new year, 2024. So I would like to pose this question to all three of you. Could you please tell me what is that one potential risk and that one potential reward in the digital arena that children and youth should keep an eye out for this year? Alana, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Ananya. And it's an interesting question, particularly because, digital technologies have really changed quite rapidly in the last few years. I mean, already technology does change quite quickly, but we've just seen some huge shifts since COVID and really the world went online. And I'm sure everyone has been tracking that artificial intelligence has really become a hot topic in the past year. And there's a lot of really cool new models out there to play with. I've really enjoyed some of the art and videos I've seen online, particularly, the ways in which young people have been really creatively expressing themselves through some of these AI models. But with the emergence of more AI generated videos and pictures and audio does come a real risk of the public being duped into believing that something fake is actually real. Particularly, this is a major election year with billions of people around the world going to the polls to vote on their elected government. And, this is a potential real challenge to democratic values if these types of videos cannot be debunked, or if information that is generated is believed. So addressing this will need to be a priority across the U.S. government as well as our external partners, and not just among young people themselves, but do want to encourage young people to be aware of those risks and thoughtfully vet any information that they encounter to make sure that it is still accurate. But, on the reward side, as I mentioned, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening with AI, and it's opening up a lot of opportunities that didn't exist before when it comes to technology. During Digital Day at UNGA last September, I learned about this nonprofit called Indigenous AI that's working on a protocol for large language models in Indigenous languages, shifting from technology really being English or global North language centered, and starting to develop AI language models that capture these lesser known languages. And an AI with the ability to document records and histories in these languages to ensure that they're not lost to time, particularly as Indigenous communities start using more common languages and use their own language less. So it creates the potential for more inclusive technologies in the future. And organizations like Indigenous AI are training youth to develop these protocols. And so that's really interesting. And initiatives like that, I think, are really exciting and show the possibility of how youth can engage in technology and really shift what we do with it going forward.
Thank you so much, Alana. Rebecca, you're next.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting examples there, Alana. Thanks. As far as children are concerned, digital technology plays an increasingly important role in protection, many different ways, but I'll talk about a couple quickly. One is facilitating birth registration, also allowing for rapid family tracing and really improving case management systems. So digital birth registration increases the number of children officially registered and eligible for services by providing faster and more accessible processes than paper-based birth registration, where often families needed to travel very long distances to register in a city center, and that prevented a sort of official documentation of these children. Rapid family tracing allows humanitarian workers to digitally enter information about separated children and share that across various locations or displaced persons camps to really speed up the process of finding children's families and reunifying them. Beyond these, we've heard, through this session about children benefiting from new learning opportunities and accessing communities that provide social connection and support. So lots of ways that these technologies are offering really positive benefits. But we know, of course, it's always that balance of being mindful of, as you increase access, you also increase risk, and how do we mitigate that? Use of digital technology has been found to contribute to poor self-esteem and isolation in some children. Really have to look at what platforms are being used and how. I think, just as a takeaway, parents, children, and youth all have a responsibility to stay aware and use caution about what they share online, what platforms and with whom. But we all, and that's governments, tech companies, civil society, we need to make the digital ecosystem safer. And all three of our strategies are aimed at supporting this, and we look forward to continuing our work together.
Thank you, Rebecca. Sarah, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone here has spoken to the benefits and the harms of digital technology. And, today we have about 20% of young people globally that are not in education, employment, or training. And so when we think about access, online technologies, I think, have a lot of promise, and they offer new ways of accessing information, learning, training, new ways of connecting to networks, combating feelings of isolation. So there's a lot of really exciting benefits of technology. We're also seeing young people, young entrepreneurs, youth organizations utilizing these tools in exciting ways to access finance, to stay connected. But as everyone has spoken about, there are risks and vulnerabilities that increase the more we see young people online. Something that our team thinks about a lot, for example, is the prevalence of online harassment and threats against young people, particularly marginalized young people, young women who are engaging in civic spaces and political leadership. And these threats can have a real chilling effect of young people's desire and willingness to step into these spaces at exactly the time when we need them the most. Something else we reflect on a lot is the mental health crisis that young people are facing around the world. Suicide is the #3 killer of adolescents globally. So again, there's enormous benefits, and then there are real risks. And so just, I think, to build on some of what Rebecca was saying just now, that for any of us who are using, integrating, promoting digital tools and content, we have to be willing to take safety measures that promote young people's well-being. And this includes engaging directly with young people in finding solutions, as we're doing with the Digital Youth Council, but this should really be happening everywhere we are and everywhere we work. And so there's a couple of ways that we can think about doing this. First and foremost, young people themselves can share ideas about how to protect each other and themselves from digital harm. They're in these spaces. They know their experiences best. When we ask them and listen and invite better understanding of how they're experiencing these online worlds, we can be better able to respond. But young people can also support one another. Parents, teachers, and caregivers should be able and willing to talk about uncomfortable realities about potential harms and learn how to recognize if something negative seems to be happening to those in their care. Schools, educators, spaces where young people gather should be ready to incorporate digital literacy into their curriculum, but also think about the safety and the norms that we set with young people when we're using these tools. And then for any of us supporting child and youth programming, we need to understand and utilize the many tools and resources available to us that can help us to prevent digital harm. And I'm excited about this conversation because I think it just surfaces all of the things that we're learning and starting to understand about the interconnectivity of digital tools and the prevention of digital harm across our programs, but also the growing number of research tools, strategies, and approaches that we can use to do better in this space. So I will just end with that as some of the ways we can think about taking action, being proactive instead of reactive to the prevention of digital harm in the work that we're doing with young people. Back to you, Ananya.
Thank you, Sarah. This was actually a very, very informative and enriching conversation. As we are coming to the close of this session, this is what comes to my mind. As a generation of young people born into the digital age, I and my peers from across the globe understand how digital technologies impact or impair our aspirations and rights. Therefore, all we need is a platform to be actually heard. Given that digital technology helps to enhance our capacity to engage with and empower youth, there is no excuse anymore to not reach out and actually seek input from the youth in a participatory way, treating them as the active and equal partners of digital development as they are. Hence, I would like to thank USAID for not only creating and implementing these strategies, but for also truly giving young people the opportunity and scope to actively inspire the policies of an international agency like the USAID. The USAID Digital Youth Council is one of the many examples of USAID translating words into actions, for setting the perfect example of nothing for us without us. I would like to thank Rebecca, Alana, and Sarah for taking the time to share their insights, for highlighting how every individual, every strategy, and every stakeholder works independently and together to navigate the complexities of the digital world and champion the well-being of children and youth in the digital arena. Thank you very much once again for joining us today. I hope you will stay tuned and enjoy the rest of the symposium. Let us continue to work together towards a safer digital future for all.